Let's start with something that seems to confuse a lot of people. Prince Harry stepping back from royal duties never meant stepping away from purpose. Somehow, certain commentators heard "stepping back" and translated it as disappearing, shrinking, apologizing and asking permission to exist. That was never the deal. Not then, not now, and certainly not when it comes to veterans. And if anyone thought Prince Harry would suddenly go quiet while soldiers were being casually disrespected in public discourse, then they truly have not been paying attention for the last decade. Because when it comes to service, sacrifice, and the people who carried the weight of wars long after politicians moved on, Harry doesn't back away. He doubles down. Recent remarks by Donald Trump regarding soldiers didn't just ripple through political circles. They hit something far deeper and far more personal, especially for veterans and military families who already feel unseen once the uniforms come off. Regardless of where anyone stands politically, there was a shared reaction across service communities. That didn't sit right. And this is where Prince Harry's response became fascinating, not because it was loud, but because it was measured, intentional, and unmistakably values-driven. Instead of clapping back with anger or engaging in headline-chasing outrage, Harry and his team did something far more effective. They announced the Invictus Spirit Awards, not as a reactionary stunt, not as a PR counterpunch, but as a reminder of what actually matters. Let's clear something up once and for all. Invictus is not a side project. It is not a hobby. It is not something Harry picked up to look busy after leaving royal life. Invictus is the one constant that has followed him through every chapter of his adult life. Before Meghan, during royal duty, after royal duty, during media storms, during family strain, during global criticism. When everything else changed, Invictus stayed, and that consistency is not accidental, it's personal. Prince Harry didn't learn about service from books or ceremonies. He learned it from deployment, from comrades, from loss, and from living inside a system where you're trained to be strong, but rarely taught how to heal. He saw firsthand what happens when soldiers come home injured, changed, and expected to simply get on with it. He understood early what many institutions still struggle to grasp. Recovery is not weakness. Invictus was born from that understanding. So when comments are made that appear dismissive of military sacrifice, Harry doesn't intellectualize it. He feels it. And instead of responding with ego, he responds with action. Harry's spokesperson from the Invictus Games released a statement that felt calm, but carried weight. Help us celebrate the very best of the Invictus community. Across the world, there are individuals whose courage, compassion and commitment embody the Invictus Spirit people and organizations who lift others up, overcome adversity, and use sport or adventurous challenge to drive recovery, hope and change. That wasn't political. That wasn't defensive. That was leadership. It didn't mention Trump. It didn't mention controversy. It didn't attack anyone. It simply re-centered the conversation on veterans. And that's exactly why it landed so powerfully. Now, let's pause for a second and appreciate the irony, because there is some comedy here. Prince Harry has been accused of wanting attention, playing the victim, being self-obsessed, using causes for personal gain, and yet every time he has the chance to centre himself, he doesn't. The Invictus Spirit Awards don't put Harry at the centre of the stage. They put others there. No dramatic monologues, no emotional speeches about his pain, no look-at-me moments, just recognition for people who've already endured more than most critics ever will. If Harry were truly obsessed with attention, he's doing a remarkably bad job of it. Here's what separates Invictus from political rhetoric. Politics uses veterans. Invictus serves them. Politics talks about strength. Invictus builds it. Politics argues about respect. Invictus shows it. And that's why this announcement felt like such a quiet but firm rebuke, not because it attacked anyone, but because it exposed the difference between talking about service and honouring it. Now let's talk about the palace, because this part matters more than people realise. Despite endless headlines about estrangement, reports suggest that King Charles has made a subtle but supportive move regarding Invictus. No grand gestures, no public endorsements, no palace fanfare, just quiet allowance. And in royal language, silence can be incredibly loud. Because if Invictus were seen as a problem, an embarrassment, or a threat to the monarchy's values, it would be shut down publicly or privately. Instead, it continues. That tells us something important. Invictus exists beyond family conflict. It belongs to something bigger. Here's the uncomfortable truth for some commentators. They prefer Harry frozen in time, the rebellious spare, the reckless party prince, the troubled royal who needs saving, because that version is easy to dismiss. But this Harry, the disciplined, purpose-driven, values-oriented leader, that version disrupts their narrative. A Harry who grows, learns and commits long-term to meaningful work doesn't fit the caricature they rely on. So instead of updating the narrative, they attack the work. If Harry were as disconnected or performative as critics claim, veterans would have walked away years ago. They haven't. In fact, many publicly defend him. Not because he's royal, not because he's famous, but because he shows up. He remembers names. He listens. He follows up. He doesn't vanish after cameras leave. In spaces where authenticity is quickly detected, Harry has passed the test again and again. Invictus isn't confined to one country or one narrative. Veterans from different nations, different conflicts, and different backgrounds come together under one idea. Injury is not the end of identity. In a world obsessed with winning, Invictus reminds us that recovery is a victory. And that message resonates globally, especially now. This announcement didn't come in a vacuum. It came at a time when veterans feel forgotten, service is politicized, empathy is framed as weakness, strength is misunderstood. Harry choosing to highlight courage and compassion at this moment was deliberate. It reframed the conversation without escalating it. And that's a skill many leaders lack. There's a narrative floating around that Harry is trying to move on from Invictus, from service work, or from his earlier commitments. The evidence says the opposite. He hasn't moved on. He's moved deeper. What changed is not his commitment, but his independence. And that independence allows him to operate with clarity instead of constraint. Here's something rarely said out loud. Invictus challenges institutions by existing. It proves that you can support veterans without exploiting them. You can lead without dominating. You can honour service without nationalism. And that makes certain power structures uncomfortable. Because Invictus doesn't ask permission from politics. It doesn't depend on approval. It just works. Prince Harry isn't chasing viral moments. He's building legacy work. Invictus will outlast news cycles. It will outlast critics. It will likely outlast many of the voices currently attacking him. And that's because it's rooted in need, not ego. There's something almost comical about how predictable the backlash has become. Harry does something good. Critics complain, veterans respond positively, critics pivot, repeat. At this point, it's less analysis and more routine. Prince Harry didn't retreat. He didn't apologize. He didn't escalate. He celebrated others. And in doing so, he reminded the world what leadership looks like when it isn't obsessed with power, but grounded in service. Invictus doesn't shout. It doesn't insult. It doesn't perform outrage. It persists. And that persistence is exactly why it matters. So, as always, we ask, who is actually showing up? Who is actually helping? Who is actually listening? Because when the noise fades, work remains, and Prince Harry's work speaks for itself. If you believe veterans deserve more than talking points, if you believe leadership is shown through action, and if you're tired of purpose being dismissed by noise, then subscribe, like, and share this video. Because truth deserves amplification.